The Alpha King's pup refuses to eat for 5 days, until the rejected Omega sang to him. The wind howled across the cliffside castle as night fell, carrying with it a sense of unease. Within the ancient stone walls, torches flickered, casting long shadows that danced along the corridors. The kingdom of the Alpha King, Kaelin, was known for its strength and order, yet even the mighty had weaknesses. Tonight the castle was restless, for something small yet vital had refused life itself. Erendor, the Alpha King's young pup, had not eaten for 5 long days. The palace healers had tried every remedy: warm broths, enchanted herbs, gentle spells, and soothing chants. Nothing worked. The boy pup had withdrawn into himself, his golden eyes hollow, his tiny body curled like a sleeping wolf in the grand chamber where only silence dared enter. Even Kaelin, feared and unchallenged by every soldier in the kingdom, could not reach him. Kaelin sat outside the pup's chamber, the weight of his crown pressing down upon him. The Alpha King was a mountain of power, with fur dark as midnight and eyes sharp as blades, yet in this moment he felt powerless. His voice, usually enough to command armies, could not stir life into the one he loved more than his kingdom. "Why won't he eat?" Kaelin whispered to himself, his voice a low rumble. His hand rested on the carved wooden door, feeling the warmth of his child beyond it, and yet the warmth felt distant. "What has happened to you, Erendor?" The answer was silence. Only the faint, shallow breath of the pup answered him, and it was not enough. Outside, on the edges of the castle grounds, Leora watched from the shadows. She had always been an outsider, a rejected Omega, as the pack called her. She had been cast away from her own family, blamed for misfortunes she had never caused. In the castle she was tolerated at best, ignored at worst. Yet she possessed a gift that none could deny: her voice. When she sang, even the wind paused to listen. Her melodies could calm storms, soothe pain, and stir hearts. Leora had heard of the pup's condition, and with permission from Kaelin, reluctantly granted, she approached the castle. The guards watched her carefully, whispering behind their hands, but the Alpha King did not speak to stop her. Somehow he knew she might be the only one who could reach Erendor. She entered the chamber quietly, kneeling beside the small bed. The pup turned his face away, his ears pressed flat against his head. Every inch of him seemed to scream distrust. Leora took a steady breath and began to hum. At first the sound was faint, like a breeze over a sleeping forest. She did not force it, she let the music flow from her soul, soft and true. Erendor stirred. A tiny movement, almost imperceptible, but enough to make Kaelin lean closer from the shadows. Leora's voice grew, not loud but filled with warmth. The melody told of safety, of home, of gentle mornings and playful days. It carried the memory of laughter, of love untouched by fear. Slowly, the pup's trembling body relaxed. Kaelin's heart clenched as he watched Erendor lift his head slightly, eyes blinking against the dim candlelight. For 5 days, no one had seen even the hint of life. Now, under the soft song of a rejected Omega, the pup looked up as if trying to remember the world. "Erendor," Kaelin whispered, though he remained hidden. His voice shook. "You're alive." The pup's small paw reached for Leora. He had no words, no strength yet, but the gesture spoke volumes. The connection was fragile but real, and Kaelin felt something he had not felt in years: hope. Leora's eyes softened, and she lowered her hand. "I'm here," she whispered. "You're safe now." The night stretched on, and the pup began to respond more. Tiny smiles, soft coos, and hesitant laughter filled the room. Kaelin watched silently, torn between pride and an unfamiliar longing. He had never considered the value of someone like Leora. Yet in that moment, he realized she held more strength than many warriors in his pack. The next morning, Kaelin entered the chamber. His steps were heavy, careful not to startle Erendor, who clung to Leora's side. "You've done well," he said, his voice a mixture of authority and awe. Leora bowed slightly, a humble gesture, though the spark of pride shone in her eyes. His strength was always there, Leora replied softly. He just needed to hear that someone believed in him. Kaelin's gaze softened, though he would not let his emotions show fully. And yet, it seems that only you could reach him. The words carried no accusation, only recognition. The pup looked at Kaelin then, his little tail wagging faintly. Leora smiled, sensing the shift in the Alpha King's heart. There was more to him than duty, more than strength and rule. Beneath it all was a man capable of love and perhaps capable of seeing her worth. Yet even in these quiet moments, danger lingered. Whispers in the castle hinted at rival factions who would use the pup's vulnerability to their advantage. Shadows of old curses lingered in the corners of the stone halls. Kaelin knew the fragile peace of this morning could shatter with the slightest misstep. Still, he did not move the pup from Leora's side. He remained in the doorway, silent, as she sang once more, filling the room with warmth and life. He could feel the bond forming, not only between the pup and the Omega, but between himself and the woman he had underestimated for far too long. For the first time in days, Kaelin allowed himself to imagine a future where his family could be safe, where Erendor could grow strong, and where he might find trust, even love, in unexpected places. But the path was not simple. Leora's past, her status as rejected, and the dangers that loomed over the kingdom promised challenges that no song alone could defeat. The pup's eyes met Kaelin's briefly, then returned to Leora, shining with a light that had been missing for nearly a week. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Kaelin's heart, guarded and heavy, felt a spark of something he had long forgotten: vulnerability. Outside the chamber, the wind whispered against the castle walls, carrying with it the faint hint of magic. Kaelin sensed it, the future of his kingdom, his heir, and perhaps even his own heart was shifting. He did not yet understand how, but he knew Leora's song had changed more than the pup. It had begun to awaken something deep inside him, something he had kept locked away for years. Leora continued to sing, her voice weaving through the room like sunlight through mist. Erendor's small hands clutched at her, leaning against her as if she were a lifeline. The pup's warmth began to return, and for the first time in days, a sense of hope filled the chamber. Kaelin watched, silently promising that no harm would reach them while he drew breath. The first chapter of a new bond had been written in the quiet of the night. Erendor had survived the darkness, not by magic alone, but by the strength of a song, the courage of a rejected Omega, and the hidden heart of an Alpha King who had learned that power was not always in strength, but in care, trust, and the willingness to see the value in someone others had dismissed. As the candlelight flickered across the chamber, shadows of the past and hints of danger still lingered. Kaelin knew the road ahead would be treacherous, but tonight he allowed himself a single, quiet moment of relief. For the first time in many nights, the pup's soft breathing, the warmth of Leora's presence, and the melody of her voice reminded him that even in the darkest castles, light could take root. And somewhere deep in the castle walls, unseen and silent, the kingdom itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. The dawn broke slowly over the castle, painting the stone walls in pale gold and silver. Outside, the mist curled around the towers, drifting like soft smoke over the cliffside. Within, the castle was waking to the sounds of distant howls and the rustling of the guards preparing for the day. But in the chamber of the young pup, there was a quiet calm that had not been there in nearly a week. Erendor stirred beneath the blankets, his golden eyes blinking against the morning light. He had eaten a small meal during the night, encouraged by Leora's gentle voice. The warmth of her presence seemed to fill the room like sunlight. His tiny paws clutched at the soft folds of her cloak, a sign of trust that made Kaelin, watching silently from the doorway, feel both awe and a strange, unfamiliar longing. "You should eat more," Leora whispered softly, brushing a strand of hair from Erendor's forehead. "Your strength will return faster that way." Erendor's small mouth opened in protest, but it was the kind of protest that meant he knew he was safe. Leora smiled gently and began humming a tune, the same melody that had coaxed him back from the brink. Kalen stepped into the chamber, his dark eyes scanning both the pup and Leora. He was careful not to make any sudden movements. He had learned that patience was necessary when dealing with children, even those of the royal bloodline. "You've done well," he said, his voice firm but not harsh. "I owe you thanks." Leora's head lifted, and she gave a small bow. "I only did what needed to be done," she said softly. "The pup needed someone who believed in him. That is all." Kalen's gaze lingered on her, seeing more than her humility. He saw strength in her stance, resilience in her eyes, and a courage that went unnoticed by those who judged her as weak. There was a spark there, and for the first time he considered that her presence might mean more than he had ever imagined. The pup's eyes met Kalen's briefly, then turned back to Leora. Kalen's chest tightened at the sight. Erendor's trust was not in him, not yet, and the feeling was both painful and humbling. The Alpha King was accustomed to obedience, to respect given without question. Yet here, in the quiet of the chamber, he realized that trust could not be demanded. It had to be earned. The morning passed slowly. Leora remained beside Erendor, guiding him through small exercises, gentle stretches, and soft lessons that combined play and learning. Kalen watched, a silent observer, feeling the invisible threads of connection weaving themselves between the three of them. Later, in the quiet of the castle library, Kalen sought Leora's presence once more. She had returned there to study ancient texts and scrolls, as she often did, seeking knowledge that had been denied to her as a rejected Omega. Kalen approached carefully, aware that he was stepping into unfamiliar territory. "You have a gift," he said, breaking the silence. "Not just your song, but your understanding, your patience. You see things others cannot." Leora's eyes lifted to meet his, cautious but not fearful. "I have known rejection," she said quietly. "I have learned to notice what others overlook." Kalen nodded slowly, understanding more than she realized. His life, too, had been shaped by expectations, by power, and by duty. He had rarely encountered someone whose pain mirrored his own in such quiet ways. Just as the conversation began to deepen, a commotion erupted in the castle courtyard. Guards shouted, and the distant sound of clashing steel echoed through the halls. Kalen's ears twitched. His instincts, honed over years of command, told him danger was near. He gestured for Leora to stay, though he knew she would not hesitate to act if needed. They moved swiftly to the battlements, peering over the edge at the source of the disturbance. A small band of shadow wolves had appeared at the edge of the forest below. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and they moved with a precision that suggested intelligence beyond that of ordinary beasts. Kalen's jaw tightened. Shadow wolves were rare, dangerous creatures, often controlled by dark magic. Their presence here was no accident. "Stay inside with the pup," he instructed Leora, though his eyes held a question he did not voice. Could she protect him if he needed help? Leora nodded, though she hesitated for only a moment. "I will keep him safe," she said firmly. Kalen barely had time to act. The shadow wolves leapt with terrifying speed, landing on the courtyard walls with ease. Guards rushed to intercept them, but the creatures were strong, fast, and cunning. Kalen descended from the battlements, his presence commanding. He moved like a storm, powerful and precise, striking with both claws and strategy. Yet even he sensed the unusual nature of the threat. Inside the castle, Leora held Erendor close. The pup's small hands clutched at her cloak as the sounds of battle reached them. She closed her eyes and began to sing, low and steady. The melody carried through the walls, not just to soothe the pup, but as a shield against fear. Erendor, frightened at first, pressed closer to her. As her voice filled the room, he felt a courage he had not known he possessed. The shadows of fear began to lift, replaced by warmth and determination. The battle outside ended as quickly as it had begun. the shadow wolves retreating as if sensing that the castle was guarded by more than mere strength. Kalen returned, his armor scratched but intact, his dark eyes scanning the chamber where Leora and the pup waited. "You were brave," he said, his voice low. "Both of you." Erendor looked up at him, a small smile playing on his lips. For the first time, he seemed to understand that Kalen was not just a figure of authority, but a protector. Leora's hand rested lightly on the pup's head, her fingers tracing gentle patterns. Kalen noticed, and something inside him stirred, a mixture of admiration, respect, and something else he did not yet name. As the day progressed, Kalen took Leora aside. "I want to know more about you," he said. "Your past, your strengths, your fears." Leora's eyes softened, but she hesitated. Few had asked her such questions without judgment. "My past is not kind," she admitted. "I was cast out, blamed for things I did not do. I was told I was weak, rejected, forgotten." Kalen listened without interruption. In her words, he recognized the reflection of his own burdens, the weight of responsibility, the isolation that power often brought. "And yet here you are," he said finally. "Strong, courageous, and necessary." Leora looked at him, a faint smile forming. "Necessary for the pup, perhaps," she said softly. "For you, I do not know." Kalen's eyes held hers, silent but insistent. He did not yet know the answer himself, but he felt the pull of something he had not felt in years: connection, trust, and the slow unfolding of respect and admiration. The rest of the day passed in a quiet rhythm. Leora taught Erendor small lessons, encouraged him to eat, and sang softly when his energy waned. Kalen observed from a distance, noting every small gesture, every flicker of trust and growth in the young pup. By nightfall, Erendor was stronger, able to sit and play, his laughter filling the room with a light that had been missing for days. Kalen allowed himself a small measure of relief, though he knew the road ahead was long. There were enemies who would seek to exploit weakness, and the shadows of the past were never far from those who walked in power. As Leora hummed a lullaby to help the pup sleep, Kalen remained at the doorway. He watched the two of them, a strange mixture of emotions twisting inside him: pride, relief, and a quiet longing. He realized that the bond forming here was not just between pup and Omega, but between all three of them. Each had something the others lacked: trust, strength, courage, and understanding. Yet even in this moment of calm, Kalen sensed that the peace was fragile. Outside the castle walls, in the depths of the forest, eyes watched. The shadow wolves had retreated, but their masters were patient. The balance of power was shifting, and the kingdom's safety hung by a thread. Kalen's gaze returned to Leora and Erendor. The pup's tiny hands clutched at her cloak as he slept, his breathing slow and steady. Leora's song was soft and unwavering, for now the castle was safe. For now trust and hope had returned. But the Alpha King knew that darkness did not rest. It waited, it watched, and soon it would come for them again. The castle's walls had never felt so heavy. Though the sun had risen, golden light failed to reach the shadows lingering in the corners. Kalen's instincts were alert, every muscle coiled with tension. The shadow wolf's appearance was only the beginning, he knew it. Something deeper, older, and darker stirred in the forest beyond the cliff. Erendor had returned to some measure of strength, but the pup's eyes held an uncertainty that no meal or lullaby could fully erase. He clung to Leora, trusting her voice and presence above all others. Kalen, as powerful and commanding as he was, still could not pierce the pup's wall of fear. "We need to know what we're facing," Kalen said quietly to Leora in the quiet of the castle library. His dark eyes, usually sharp with command, held a rare vulnerability. "I cannot protect him from something I cannot see." Leora's expression was calm, but her heart beat faster. She had learned to face danger alone, but never alongside the Alpha King and his heir. "The forest is alive," she said. "It will test us, test the pup. But I think he is ready to face what he fears." Kalen's jaw tightened. "Then we go, together." By midday, they prepared for the journey into the forest. The trees stood like giants, twisted and dark, their roots curling across the moss-covered ground like ancient serpents. Light barely touched the forest floor, and a whisper of wind carried with it the scent of unknown magic. Even Kaelin's sharp senses struggled to perceive the full dangers hidden within. Erendor hesitated at the edge of the path. The forest seemed endless, dark, and forbidding. He pressed closer to Leora, who knelt beside him, taking his small hands in hers. "You are stronger than you think," she whispered. "And you are not alone. I will stay with you and Kaelin will protect you. But you must try even a little. Step forward." Erendor nodded, small but determined. He took the first step into the forest, guided by Leora's calm presence and Kaelin's watchful shadow behind them. The forest seemed to breathe around them, branches creaking, shadows shifting, and the distant howl of unseen creatures echoing through the trees. As they moved deeper, illusions began to appear. Shadows twisted into figures familiar and strange. Erendor froze when he saw a shadow that resembled his father's wolf, larger and more menacing than Kaelin ever appeared in reality. His tiny body trembled. "Do not be afraid," Leora whispered. She began to sing, her voice low and steady. The melody was ancient, one her mother had taught her before she was cast out. It carried not just sound but courage. It wove through the forest, cutting through the illusions, holding the pup's fear at bay. Kaelin moved beside them, alert and ready. Though he had faced countless dangers, he had never seen magic so subtle and potent. The forest seemed to respond to Leora's song, as if recognizing its power and retreating in small ways from its own illusions. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by Leora's soft singing and Erendor's quiet steps. The pup began to walk more steadily, confidence growing with each note of her melody. Kaelin could see it, the light returning to his eyes, the first real sign of courage. Suddenly, the forest opened into a small clearing. The air shimmered as if with magic, and at its center stood a mirror of polished obsidian. Its surface rippled like water, reflecting not just their images but visions of the past, the present, and possible futures. Kaelin's dark eyes narrowed. He could sense the ancient magic surrounding it. "This is a test," he said. "We cannot ignore it." Leora knelt beside Erendor. "Look only at what you need to see," she said softly. "Do not be afraid." The pup stepped forward, small and hesitant, and the mirror revealed a vision. A kingdom shrouded in shadow, the castle in flames, and himself alone and afraid. Erendor's paws froze. He looked at Leora, eyes wide with fear. "It is not real," Leora whispered. "It is only a warning, but we will face it together." Kaelin stepped closer, placing a protective hand on the pup's shoulder. "You are never alone," he said firmly. "Not now, not ever." Erendor inhaled deeply and then stepped forward, guided by Leora's song. The vision shifted, and the shadow of fear began to waver. The pup's courage, small but growing, pushed against the magic. Leora's melody grew stronger, each note carrying a reassurance that words could not convey. As they faced the mirror, Kaelin realized something important. It was not his strength that was keeping the darkness at bay, it was their unity. The pup's trust in Leora, Leora's courage, and Kaelin's protection combined to form a force stronger than any magic the forest could summon. But the forest was not yet done. From the shadows, a figure emerged, a wolf larger than any natural beast, with eyes glowing a fierce red. Its presence radiated hunger and malice. Kaelin's muscles tensed. "This is what has been following us," he said, voice low and dangerous. "The Shadow Wolf's master." "It will not be easy," Erendor whimpered, pressing against Leora. She held him close, continuing to sing, her voice trembling but unbroken. Kaelin stepped forward, his claws glinting in the dim light, ready to face the creature. The wolf advanced, moving with terrifying intelligence. It struck with speed and precision, but Kaelin met it with power honed by years of rule and battle. The fight was intense. The the clash of strength and magic echoing through the forest. Leora stayed with Urindor, her song now a shield, protecting him from fear and despair. The pup watched, small but determined, and something inside him stirred. He realized he could not remain just a follower. He had to act, to face the fear that had haunted him for so long. Summoning courage he did not know he possessed, he stepped into the open, facing the shadow wolf. Kalen noticed the spark in the pup's eyes, a flicker of the alpha bloodline. With Leora's song as his guide and Kalen's presence as his shield, Urindor made the first move. The wolf hesitated, sensing the pup's bravery and the strange magic that bound them together. With a coordinated effort, Kalen, Leora, and Urindor forced the shadow wolf back. The creature, though fierce, could not break the unity they had formed. It retreated, slinking into the shadows of the forest, its red eyes burning with promise of return. Breathing heavily, Kalen looked at the pup. Urindor's chest rose and fell rapidly, yet his golden eyes were bright, unafraid for the first time in days. Leora knelt beside him, smiling, brushing the damp hair from his forehead. "You did it," she whispered. "You faced what you feared." Urindor looked at Kalen, then at Leora. He smiled, a small, real smile. I wasn't alone," he said softly. Kalen knelt as well, his dark eyes holding something unspoken. "No," he said, "never alone, not while we stand together." The forest seemed to exhale, the shadows receding slightly. The magic of the clearing was no longer oppressive. It acknowledged their courage, their unity, and the bonds formed between them. But even in victory, Kalen's instincts told him danger was not gone. The shadow wolves had masters, and dark forces lingered in the forest, patient and cunning. They would return, stronger and more dangerous. Leora helped Urindor to his feet, singing softly to calm his nerves. Kalen watched them, realizing the truth. This pup and this rejected Omega had done something remarkable. They had faced darkness together, and in doing so, begun to awaken a power that even he had underestimated. As they made their way back to the castle, the forest seemed quieter, yet it was not empty. Eyes followed them, unseen and calculating. Kalen led the way, protective and commanding, but he knew the trials were far from over. Urindor walked confidently now, small but brave, holding onto Leora's hand. Kalen followed closely, his presence a shadow of strength behind them. In that moment, he realized something that had been stirring in his heart for days. Leora was more than a helper, more than a protector. She was essential, not only to the pup, but perhaps to him as well. As the castle came into view, the sun dipping toward the horizon, a sudden chill ran through the air. Kalen's ears twitched. Somewhere in the forest, deeper than they had traveled, a howl echoed, long, low, and filled with intent. He stopped, his gaze darkening. The shadow wolves had returned, and they were no longer alone. The sun was just beginning to rise over the cliffside castle, scattering gold and silver across the stone towers. The forest that had tested them the day before now lay quiet, but Kalen knew better than to trust the calm. The shadow wolves and their mysterious master were still out there, waiting, patient and cunning. Inside the castle, Urindor slept peacefully for the first time in days. His tiny hands clutched Leora's cloak, a symbol of trust he had placed fully in her care. Leora sat beside him, her head resting lightly on her hand, singing a soft, steady lullaby that wrapped the pup in warmth and courage. Kalen stood near the doorway, watching silently, his dark eyes softened by both relief and admiration. The trials of the forest had revealed much. Urindor had shown courage, small but growing, and Leora's strength, once dismissed, had proven essential. Kalen realized something he had long avoided admitting. She was not just a healer or a helper. She was a force of her own, capable of standing beside him in ways few could. "Has he eaten well today?" Kalen asked softly, stepping into the room. His voice was low, careful not to disturb the fragile calm. "Yes," Leora said, her eyes still on the pup. "And he is strong, stronger than he knows." Kalen nodded. Good, he will need that strength. Darkness never rests. Erendor stirred at the sound of Kalen's voice, blinking sleepily. He smiled faintly and reached for the Alpha King, the small gesture showing that some walls had begun to crumble. Kalen knelt, allowing the pup to climb onto his lap. Leora's song continued, soft and unbroken, a bridge of comfort between child and king. The moment was quiet, fragile, but powerful. Kalen could feel the bonds forming, the pup's trust in Leora, his own growing reliance on her wisdom, and the subtle thread of something unspoken between them. It was not love, not yet. But it was something that could grow into it, a connection forged through courage, care, and shared trials. A sudden knock at the door broke the quiet. A guard entered, bowing quickly. Alpha King, a messenger has arrived from the northern borders. The Shadow Wolves, their master, has been seen gathering others. They are preparing to attack. Kalen's dark eyes narrowed. Prepare the defenses, he said firmly. I want every guard ready and every spell of protection in place. He paused, then glanced at Leora. You will remain here with the pup. Leora shook her head. I have faced the forest, she said softly. I can help. I will not leave him unprotected. Kalen studied her, silent for a moment. Her courage, tempered by care, reminded him of what he had learned in the forest. Strength was not only in battle but in presence and guidance. Very well, he said finally. We face this together, but stay close to the pup. Nothing will come between him and us. The day passed in preparation. Guards trained, magical wards were reinforced, and the castle hummed with tension. Kalen and Leora remained with Erendor, ensuring he was safe and calm. The pup's trust in both of them had grown. He walked alongside Leora, occasionally glancing at Kalen for reassurance. As night fell, the sky darkened, the stars faint behind a heavy veil of clouds. The forest beyond the cliff seemed to pulse with anticipation, as if it knew the coming confrontation. Kalen, Leora, and Erendor stood together on the battlements, looking out toward the tree line. This will not be easy, Kalen said, his voice low. Their master is powerful. The Shadow Wolves are only the beginning. Leora nodded, taking Erendor's hand. We have faced fear before. Together we can stand against it. Kalen's gaze lingered on her. Together, he agreed, the single word carrying weight and promise. The attack came at midnight. From the forest, a wave of shadow wolves emerged, moving with precision and speed that few could match. Their eyes glowed red in the dark, teeth bared, and their growls echoed across the cliffside. Kalen moved first, a storm of claws and power striking with precision. Leora stayed beside Erendor, singing low and steady, her voice weaving a shield of courage around the pup and their allies. The magic of her song was subtle but undeniable. It slowed the shadows, turning fear into hesitation. Erendor, though small, stepped forward. He had learned in the forest that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. The pup's small paws carried him into the open, where the magic of Leora's song and Kalen's protection intersected. The shadow wolves hesitated, sensing the strength of their unity. The battle was fierce but brief. The shadow wolves, though numerous, could not break the bond between the Alpha King, the pup, and the rejected Omega. One by one they were driven back, retreating into the dark forest from which they had emerged. When the last shadow wolf vanished, silence fell. The forest seemed to hold its breath, acknowledging the courage and unity of the defenders. Erendor, though trembling, smiled brightly at Leora. I did it, he said softly. Yes, Leora whispered, brushing a hand over his hair. You did it, and you were never alone. Kalen watched the scene, his chest tight with relief and something more profound. Leora's song had guided and protected them. The pup's courage had turned fear into strength, and together they had faced a darkness that many would have faltered before. The night ended quietly. The castle was safe, and the pup slept peacefully for the first time in many nights. Leora remained beside him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder, a silent promise that she would always be there. Kalen watched from the doorway, feeling the weight of his own heart and the bonds that had formed. Days passed, and the kingdom began to breathe again. Erendor grew stronger, playing in the sunlit courtyards, laughing and learning. His trust in Leora remained unshaken, and Kalen's respect for her deepened with each passing day. He began to see her not just as a helper, but as a partner in thought, in strategy, and in life. One morning, Kalen called a meeting in the council hall. Leora stood at his side, her presence commanding yet calm. For centuries, rejected Omegas had been ignored or dismissed, but now she stood as an example of strength, wisdom, and courage. Kalen's declaration was simple but profound. Leora had earned her place, not by birth, but by actions that saved the pup, the alpha, and the kingdom. The council members murmured in surprise, some in admiration, others in grudging respect. Leora remained composed, meeting every gaze with quiet assurance. She had been rejected, but now she was recognized. She had found her place, and it was not through pleading or luck, but through courage and integrity. Kalen stepped closer, speaking directly to her. "You have shown me something I had forgotten," he said. "That strength comes in many forms. That care, courage, and understanding can be as powerful as any weapon. Thank you, Leora." Her eyes met his, and in them he saw recognition, respect, and the hint of something unspoken, a bond that had grown through trials, danger, and shared courage. She nodded slightly. "Thank you, Alpha King," she said softly, "for seeing me even when others would not." Erendor, now strong and lively, ran between them, laughing and calling for attention. Kalen lifted him, holding him close. The pup's trust, once so fragile, was now complete. Leora smiled, joining them in this quiet family moment. For the first time in many months, the castle felt truly alive. The bond between the three of them, Alpha, Pup, and Omega, was stronger than any fear, more enduring than any shadow, and filled with hope. Yet Kalen knew that the world beyond the castle walls would never remain quiet. There were always threats, always shadows, always challenges that would test them. But he had learned something vital. They would face it together. The pup's laughter echoed in the halls, Leora's gentle hum filled the rooms with warmth, and Kalen stood, powerful yet humble, ready to meet whatever the future held. Together, they had survived darkness, discovered courage, and formed a bond that could not be broken. As dawn turned to morning, a gentle breeze whispered across the castle. In the distance, a new howl echoed, not menacing, but curious, as if the forest itself acknowledged their victory and awaited their next step. Kalen, Leora, and Erendor looked toward the horizon, their hands finding each other's in quiet solidarity. They had faced shadows, discovered strength, and formed a bond of trust and love. And though danger would come again, they would meet it united, ready and unbroken.